Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm going to carry on with Mark chapter 14, starting at verse 1. Now the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were looking for some sly way to arrest Jesus and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of a man known as Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. So this speaks of the importance to this day of anointing. So again, this is all about how to implement what we're seeing here in our lives actively, as shows of displays of our faith to Jesus. So if you haven't been, get anointed is what this is speaking to. Any baptized Christian brother can anoint you. It's a wonderful and important thing to do. Beautiful little gesture. What's really cool too about this girl breaking this jar of really expensive perfume. This was a year's wages. So figure today's money, we know we're between $50,000 and $100,000, euros, whatever. And it was this girl's dowry, which also speaks to the relevance still within Christianity of dowries. I'm starting to think we should bring those back. That sounds like a good idea. That with the troubles that women bring to men, I think it's a good idea. I think it's a nice little compensation for a gift to come along with that for the hardships that they inevitably bring us. But in any case, practicing dowries is a good thing to do if that's something that you feel called to. And as you're walking with the Lord, make sure that you get anointed. Ask your believing friends if they've been anointed or not, and do that. If not, it's a really good idea. It's an act of faith, and I'm certain that God has some sort of way that He uses that to then further your walk, something along those lines. Verse 4. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me." So what is going on here is Jesus is being anointed for burial. So they're normally back in these times they would pour perfume on someone after they died. She's doing this before Jesus dies, basically acknowledging and recognizing, hey, I know you're about to die, and I'm preemptively anointing you, which is pretty neat because Jesus had told the disciples by this point a couple of times that he was going to die, and they weren't getting it. It wasn't registering to them. They were still a little surprised when he ended up dead, which is really cool. There's something really neat about the faith of women and the way they're able to see things that sometimes us guys don't. Again, back to, if you check out my marriage and dating series, that ties in very well with the idea that men and women need each other. We have different gifts and different roles to play and different abilities that complement one another beautifully. Verse 7, "The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me." So there's another one we can apply. Don't try to solve world hunger. It won't happen. Jesus is declaring here that there will always be poor people in this world, in this era that we're living in, this dispensation, and in heaven and in the kingdom coming. Jesus talks quite a few times about storing up your treasures in heaven, and there are many people who are going to make it into heaven, but they haven't stored any treasures up there. So comparatively speaking, they're going to be poor. That doesn't mean they're going to be on the side of the streets begging or anything like that, I'm sure. But that there will always be poor people. There will always be people who don't have much. Help those that you can. It's a great thing to do, and it's a great way to store up your treasures in heaven. But there will always be poor people. Do what you can for them, especially the ones in your immediate vicinity. Don't go out trying to solve world hunger. I would recommend also against these broad-reaching global hunger programs and things like that. They tend to be a way that money can kind of be siphoned out into not the best uses. But we'll always have the poor, and helping them is a great way to store up your treasures in heaven so that when you get there, you're not poor. Verse 8, she did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted to hear this and promised to give him money, so he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?" So he sent 2 of his disciples, telling them, "Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, 'The teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large upper room, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there." The disciples left and went into the city and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me." 2 important things to see here is, number one, the Passover, traditionally speaking in these times especially, would always be eaten with family, and that's what's going on here as well. However, as this same recurring theme keeps happening, Jesus is eating with his family, but none of his relatives are there. As he had mentioned earlier, those that do the will of his Father are his mother and brother and sister and father and all that other stuff. Friends are family, and Jesus is modeling this. So, great recommendation, have more friend-based holiday celebrations. You don't necessarily need to axe your family celebration of holidays if you're not at that point, but I do, and I recommend it. But in any case, it's important to celebrate holidays with friends. Make a point to do that. I would recommend exclusively with friends, and carry that on just the same way Jesus is modeling us. And also, Jesus knows that one of these guys is going to betray him, and yet he's eating with him anyways. He knows that Judas is going to betray him and to death, and he's still not even turning him away as a friend. Really cool. They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, "Surely not I." "It is one of the 12, he replied, "one who dips bread into the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Because ending up in hell is worse than not being born. And that's what that's hinting at. That's where he's going to go, I presume. It's not my place to judge, but I don't think it worked out for him. Not my place to judge to condemnation. We'll get to that later. Or no, we've seen that previously, actually. We'll get to it again, I'm sure. 22. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, gave thanks and broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Then he took the cup, gave thanks, and offered it to them, and they all drank from it. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." He said to them, "I tell you the truth, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine again. I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God." When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. 27. "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written, 'I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered.' But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter declared, "Even if all fall away, I will not." "I tell you the truth," Jesus answered. "Today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, you yourself will disown me 3 times. But Peter insisted emphatically, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the others said the same. It goes to show, we'll see how this works out later, but it goes to show that even though we think we're really strong in the faith, we think we've got a great walk with Jesus, we think our faith is secured, it is important to keep sticking by Jesus as much as we can, because as we'll see in a bit, when times get hard, it can be really tempting to deny Jesus, and we're all susceptible to that, which is also part of why it's important to recognize that we will not be here when the mark of the beast comes, because then Christians would fall for that. At least more than one would, and Jesus doesn't want any of that going on. So we'll see that later, but just be aware of how feeble we are as humans. Even though we want to be strong in our faith and we love Jesus, our flesh is weak. Verse 32. Then they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little further, he fell on the ground and prayed that if possible the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." That's a really important thing to keep in our prayers, is to pray for what we want, as Jesus is doing here, but then to also, I recommend ending your prayers with submitting with, "But your will be done. I want this thing. I feel this pull. I feel like I should do this. I want you to bless this area of life, but your will be done," because God knows what we want, he knows what we need, and he knows what's best for us, and he wants to give us good things. So if he's not giving us something good, it's for our best. In the same way that God doesn't take that cup from Jesus because it is ultimately for the best, because in the end our salvation comes from it. Which, actually, come to think of it, that shows that even Jesus had that vulnerability to wanting to get out of a hard situation and wanting to not fall away or turn away in the way that Peter was, but that he was tempted to well, he was asking to get out of the hard thing, even though I'm sure he had a deeper understanding that this was important. But in that moment, under that pressure, he was going, "Oh, this is too much," but submitted to his Father's will despite that fact. 37. Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep?" Notice, by the way, here he's using Peter's old name, Simon, which meant shifting sands, as opposed to Peter, which meant the rock. So he's kind of it's a little poke at, like, hey, you're going back to being shifting sand. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping, because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. So, in Christian terms, the church staff literally sent this group out to arrest and murder Jesus, which is wild. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Jesus said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. Don't do that. That's not something we want to apply here in this New Testament lifestyle. Then they took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. Then he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they could not find any, or they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another not made by man. Yet even then their testimony did not agree. And what Jesus was talking about there was, he was talking about his body being the temple that would be destroyed, and they weren't catching that metaphor, and they tried to use that against him, and it still wasn't sticking. Verse 60. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again the high priest asked him, Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? By the way, where Jesus there is saying that he will see him coming with the clouds. So he's basically saying that, first of all, Jesus is going to come back, and second of all, that all the Jews are going to see him, as we'll see later on. They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fist, and said, Prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest came by. When she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You also were with that Nazarene Jesus, she said, but he denied it. I do not know or understand what you're talking about, he said, and he went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, This fellow is one of them. Again he denied it. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean. He began to call down curses on himself and swore to them, I don't know this man you're talking about. Immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and wept. We'll carry on 15 and 16 in another video and wrap up from there. Talk soon, guys. God bless.